Flips in a gully and a couple in quite tight on the onside as well. Yeah! Clips it away for 4. And that is Test century number 3 for the New Zealand wicketkeeper batsman BJ Watling. And what an effort it has been. 297 deliveries and 422 arduous minutes. Wonderful stuff.
BJ Watling, New Zealand's chauffeur in a crisis. Most successful Test wicketkeeper of all time. Just under 3,800 runs at 37.5 runs per dismissal, with 800s and a higher score of 205, holder of both the second and third highest partnerships for the 6th wicket in Test history. That's including in more than 2,500 Test matches. The 7th highest score in Tests as a wicketkeeper. He averaged 53 against England at a time when 2 of the greatest fast bowlers of all time, James Anderson and Stuart Broad, were at the peak of their powers, and perhaps most tellingly, averaged more than 40 when New Zealand lost the toss. BJ Watling made a habit out of scoring tough runs. In today's discussion, he suggests what aspiring batsmen should focus on in today's fast-paced version of the game. He shares his lowest point as a batsman and gives an enlightening example for why he thinks Kane Williamson is one of the best in the game. If you're an aspiring batsman, what you'll pick up from BJ's conversation is his love of scoring runs, his focus to get the job done no matter how it looks, the importance of exploring new scoring options in training, having a clear training plan, and how the best players are the best problem solvers in the middle. I began by asking BJ what advice he has for batsmen currently outside of the system who are trying to find a way in.
It's always a tough one, I think, when you're outside potentially of the system, and that want or that hunger to be there creates that pressure or the feeling of having to score runs every time, and this, I think you certainly need the hunger, and it's probably cliche and now that coaching, but the old get good 30s, get good 40s, but don't kick on. I do think that actually plays a part when you have the opportunity as a batter, because as you know, you will miss out on occasions. There will be some good balls, there will be some bad luck, etc. But when those opportunities arise to go large or to make an impression or play a significant role in a game, then I think the onus is on actually grabbing it and not giving it away. And it's a different world now in terms of 2020 cricket, one-day cricket, Test cricket, and the baseball. But those are the types of things that are going to get you noticed if you're not within the system. And to be fair, at international level, the guys that do well, the I guess the Fab Four, as you call them, or the young crop coming through as well, they average 55. Like there's obviously a certain level of consistency there, and they are scoring huge amounts of runs in hundreds, and so that's, I guess, when you're in and you've got the opportunity, it's not about giving it away for me, and that might be old school, but I think if you're trying to make teams and trying to be seen, you've got to take that type of approach into your batting.
And is that something that you make really clear with you guys at the Brave?
Yeah. It is tricky. Like, and it's almost, I think we're pretty clear in terms of guys coming through the age groups, through the pathways, that is a must. Like it is scoring runs. And there's always going to be certain situations, I think, where you see a bit of talent and a bit of potential that's potentially a bit younger. And this is what I'm learning as a coach now and as a selector. But you are going to have those cracks, I guess, to see if they are able to develop quicker and be a part of the system. So it is always tricky, but I think if you look at Devon Conway, for example, he came over from South Africa. played club cricket in Wellington for a long period of time and eventually got his crack for the Firebirds. And within those 2 or 3 years, he certainly didn't let an opportunity slip. When he got into that team, he made a count. Was there a 100 there potentially? I need to Google that, but there was a huge amount of runs in all formats to get noticed and to be able to get the opportunities that he now has for New Zealand. So, yeah. Sometimes when you're younger, it might happen. Sliding doors, you get the opportunity and you can grab it, but sometimes you might have to work a little bit harder to do that. And I guess that's a good example of the way Dev went about it when he came over here.
Look, personally, I'd be a huge advocate of what you're saying as well. I feel like there's a little bit of conflict though at times in terms of what you're saying and finding ways to, when you do get a start, maximize that by batting for as long as you can with, the mindset that's required to probably be successful in T20 where there's obviously more of a focus on how are you able to put the bowler under pressure most balls. So with that conflict, how do you sort of work with your guys in terms of coaching that?
I think you look at it as that consistency piece a little bit more, and you're probably not expecting it to happen game after game after game because you don't have that opportunity to settle into an innings or assess conditions as quickly. So you obviously expect 2020 to be a bit more hit and miss, and in terms of that leniency, it's probably there a little bit more because of that. We expect guys to play for the team, to play a role or to contribute in some way in a batting innings for 2020s that requires risk. And I think as a coach and a selector, you look at that and there's certainly I think a longer line to, if you see the potential for the player to come out the other end and that the ability that they have. It is tricky in 2020, especially your roles. I think if you're a batter, you want to be 1, 2, or 3 because you're going to get more opportunity to impress and score bigger scores or ride a wave of pressure where you might not be able to score at 150. It might be you're striking at 90 for a little period of time, but you can come out the other end. And I guess that's what we're seeing these days in terms of your number 5, 6, and 7 are all power hitters. Just, I guess, to say, or guys that are able to work it out and find their own method to still strike at 150, 160 through those middle overs and into the death. So, I mean, the game's certainly changed a lot over the years in terms of that.
So when it comes to selection, is it difficult when you see a player who technically shapes up really well, you feel like they've got the potential to play a higher standard of cricket than they're currently playing? Where do you and say the Brave in general sit when it comes to trying to reward runs and maybe players who are a bit unorthodox, scoring buckets of runs versus a guy maybe isn't scoring as many, but technically you feel like he's going to have a better chance when you get to the next level?
But more based on the performance and the character and the attitude and I'm not terribly phased. I mean, we see lots of different techniques. I think somehow if you're able to find the middle of the bat more often than not, or have solid enough control, but you've got the ability to work out an innings or to build an innings or whatever format it is, I'm certainly not one to go, right, well, he's got a better technique. I think you certainly look at it and go, can that technique survive and how sustainable is it to a certain degree? But I think you can look at the likes of Steve Smith and Chanderpaul, for example. Like these types of players, they've got different methods of going about it, but what they've done is they've problem solved and they've worked it out, and they understand their strengths, they understand their weaknesses, and mentally they basically stick to it and do it over and over again. And so certainly not picking too much on technique at all. It's what you see in the player and their performances leading into it.
And that approach, is that something you would say personally, would you have felt as strongly about that as, say, a teenager coming through the New Zealand system at the time you did, when I feel like, we had the biomechanics kind of phase, which I think you were sort of on the back end of. I feel like technique was pretty important, maybe even more so than performances at that time. Is that approach that you're referring to there, is that something that's evolved over time as a player and now as a coach?
Yeah, I do remember a lot of that time. I never thought about it around selection or to that degree, but yes, yeah. I mean, as my philosophy, I guess, as a coach would be, are you able to solve problems, and are you able to deal with situations that are put in front of you? Because that's cricket, right? You're going to have a whole lot of different situations. You could map it out the best you want, but pretty much every time you go out into the middle as a batter, there's going to be a different situation, except for maybe some opening batters. But again, the conditions could be different. It could be cloudy, the lights could be on, it could be swinging around, it could be flat as. There's so many different scenarios in the game, which makes it so beautiful, I guess, and it's so interesting to play sometimes and so challenging. But yeah, I don't think there's one way. There's certainly not one way to do things, and I know New Zealand cricket, and yeah, the times have changed a little bit since 25 years ago, and the open-mindedness now is certainly a lot more than what it might have been back in the day.
Yeah, I'm interested now, like if we look at the work you're doing with the Brave, and you work as head coach for the Brave, do you end up getting much time with your batsmen specifically, or how does your role work? Are you more sort of setting up structures as a head coach, or are you often finding yourself you've got time to work with batsmen when time allows?
Yeah. During the winter, certainly a lot more time to work with individuals. I've got Daniel Flynn, who he's our assistant, and so he's doing he's the batting coach. I'll chip in every now and then, but I've sort of been running the bowlers a little bit more and just overseeing that side of things as a specialist kind of part. But yeah, during the season, you do find yourself player managing a lot more than coaching. That's probably the wrong way to put it. I think we're always asking questions of the players and how they're approaching innings, etc., or how they're approaching their bowling. But I like to think a lot of the technical and a lot of the detail coaching happens during the winter or the pre-season, where you can challenge a lot more. You can explore a lot more. You might change, I don't know, a grip, or you might explore a cricket shot or reverse sweep for the first time. So I find during the winter and pre-season is the time to have a play around, but really trying to hone into what the players' plans are individually during the season, more so than anything else. And I really try and avoid anything terribly technical unless it's worth the crack, right? A player might, be willing to explore something if it's not going so well, or so it's just so busy these days. You're literally playing, traveling, playing. You need a little bit of time to make some big adjustments if required. So I'd like to hone in the mental side or the game planning side more so than anything.
Right. I'm interested in how you structure team trainings for the different formats. So you've just alluded to the fact that, it's a busy schedule. You're traveling you probably get what, 1 or 2 sessions max at the moment in between games. So, with the current schedule as it is, what do how do you structure a T20 training, for example, and what are you ultimately just trying to get out of it?
Yeah, it'll change every now and then. We might mix it up every so often with a bit of structure and a bit of detail. For example, you might go in there with a bit of a rogue approach and say, look, we're not going to hit the ball in the air today. And we're just coming back to some of those simple things, some of the maybe one-day cricket things or red ball cricket things where just it's nice and simple. The ball's still arriving. You're playing good, clean cricket shots. So often, and as a player, guilty as well, don't get me wrong, you come into the 2020 nets and it's, whoa, the ball's flying everywhere. You're trying to do this and that and a bit of everything. And there's not many you actually hit that well, which are great. And I'm all for those sessions, and we certainly have those exploring sessions a lot, especially during 2020. But just every now and then, and individually or as a team, we'll just try and rein that in, just to simplify things and to remember that. And one thing we're really focusing on this year as a batting unit is strong cricket shots. We forget about a good, hard shot on the ground. Often that actually picks you up 2 runs, if not a 4, quite a lot. When you're swinging so hard and you cloth it on the inside edge and it goes nowhere, you get 1 anyway. So just little reminders like that might be a way that we structure a batting net. Apart from that, yeah, pretty simple. We wouldn't do a lot, too much more.
How do you coach any batsman? Say you've got a guy who's maybe struggling with the consequence of getting out. So, maybe they're moving formats. Is there a way you bring consequence to your net sessions as well?
We certainly gave that a crack at pre-season this year. I think it's more based around red ball. You might add a little bit into the white ball stuff just in case they're getting too carried away and playing too many. I mean, this probably sounds wrong, doesn't it? Playing too many shots. It's kind of the world these days. But yeah, you're trying to create those consequences. And we'll talk about like phases of the game. So, like for example, a one-day game, you're often looking to hit the boundary sweepers hard. I know there's 5 in the ring at the time. So where's your one boundary option? And if you're watching guys approach hitting the cover sweeper against the spinner or playing a sweep shot hard for 1, you're going, okay, they're kind of prepping for a game or prepping like they are in the middle overs. And if they're looking for that one boundary option every so often, I think it puts them in a decent match preparation state. If you see guys looking to whack it for 4 the whole time, you're kind of going, what are you working on here? But in one net, in red ball base, I try to get the guys. See, often you have 6 balls. There's a batter down one end, and you swap, and that's the classic sort of routine. Try it a few times to just go right. If you get out within your 6 balls, you sit down for 6 balls. So the batter at the other end gets about 12 balls just to bat and do their thing, which isn't a harsh consequence by any stretch. I don't think anyway. It's a little kick up the arse because the bowler knows that you have to sit down for 12 balls. Everyone kind of sees it. So your ego gets hit a little bit. I haven't actually done this myself as a player. But it's not so harsh that your net's over and you can't go back and work on things. So that was one thing I certainly tried at pre-season, just to rein guys in, or just to put a bit of emphasis on your wicket or your decision making in a net. You can't just play a clip off your legs 2 meters in the air because there's likely to be a mid wicket there, right? And yes, in the net you can go, I missed him by 2 meters, or well, maybe it didn't too, and your innings is over. So can you just be a little bit more reflective on yourself to get over the top of the ball and control it, or actually go over the top and hit a boundary over the top. So we're not hitting those balls catching height all the time. That was kind of a method that we used.
Right. What advice would you have for aspiring batsmen today trying to make their way in the game, given I guess there's a real preference for white ball cricket and the ability to score 360 degrees, score at a quicker rate. What would you be encouraging young batsmen to focus on?
I did look at that question and went, oh yeah, I haven't got much of an answer for it. I don't know. Keep exploring, trying to advance your game. Every time you're in a net or a drill situation, you're trying to learn, aren't you? And I do still believe in the basics of the game, and whether you're adding a scoop shot in or a reverse scoop, guys are getting pretty good at that sort of stuff these days. It is still working harder and making sure that it's these options that you're taking are proper strength and you're able to put them into the game, into a situation, and read that situation. When is the right time for this approach? And I think if guys are able to have real strengths and stick to them for over and over and over again, and it might not always work, but I think that might add some consistency in performance. But that is an assumption. But I would always encourage guys to go to their strengths, and if you need to add some strengths, go away and work on it until you're confident as in the game to pull out a reverse sweep, for example, and then when you're out there, commit to it. Absolutely own it. Like, right, I've got one point there. I need to change the field. I am going to reverse sweep it, and there's no hesitation. You own that shot and you just go for it. And if you get out to it, well, then you go again the next game too, until it becomes a problem, and you might go, okay, it's not quite ready yet. I need to do more work on
it. Was there ever a period in your career where you had to go back as a batsman? You had to go back to square one because you were facing some challenges, potentially any technical issues, and then had to sort of build your game back up?
I always thought when I was younger, 19, 20, 21, through that start of my first-class career, that was some big learning through there and realising what you're coming up against. And so the biggest adjustments that I had were definitely around that time. I think I basically planted my front foot across, could play a drop kick every now and then, where Chris Martin was certainly challenging when the ball was swinging in and a good clip. And every now and then I clip him over the top of mid-wicket and be a mean shot. But to be fair, more often than not, he actually would wrap you on the front pad and it was game over. So that was a massive learning for me, was that there was certainly some adjustments that I did need to make in order to be consistent, or at least be a little bit successful at first-class level. But as a player, you had to be quite open, I think, to doing that, and open-minded and exploring. And that's why I talk about the winter and having a good 4 or 5 months to try and implement some of these changes that you might want to make. So I reckon those are the times when I was tinkering a lot and trying to find a way to be successful against 135k, 140k an hour bowlers that are pretty much, hitting the top of off for the most part of the time. How are you going to score runs? How are you going to be successful against that? And I wouldn't say after that, and it was in like overhauls or anything, but when you do travel the world and you play in India, you play in South Africa, Australia, all these different places that pitches and conditions are completely different. Again, I think you have to be open-minded to making adjustments to try and counter their strengths and your weaknesses, especially against spin, right? Subcontinent spinning, we've always been challenged in those conditions. So what are we going to do, or what was I going to do to try and find ways to play some of these some of these bowlers in some of these conditions. So, like, I mean, that'd be a piece of advice that I'd give to a lot of batters: is you've got to be open-minded. Like, yes, trust your skills, trust your ability, and you back your strengths, but keep trying to make those, or keep trying to evolve. Sweeps, using your feet, like, because what you do, let's say in New Zealand, and it might be successful in India, don't get me wrong, but it might not be as well. So what are you going to do to make those adjustments, and how are you going to achieve that in certain conditions?
Yeah,
Not sure I answered your question there.
No, you have. Look, I think there's a couple of points that are interesting there. In particular, I think the idea about being open-minded is probably coming through age group system into men's cricket for myself. It probably wasn't one of my strengths. I was probably a bit stubborn about, probably wanting to take on, like working out whose advice should you really be listening to. So, from your perspective, was there ever sort of stubbornness, or was it at the point in your career where results were suggesting that a change just needed to be made?
I always think there's going to be a certain level of stubbornness, but I did my best to listen and try and understand. I mean, we've had some great players. I was lucky enough to play with some great players as well, and you're always asking questions about how they might go about their innings, or how they play spin. And I was always keen to try it out as well. Like, and if you get the opportunities to try it out, then you're able to work it out yourself as well. So, like, I was never against any feedback or any suggestions to try something. I guess the tricky part is, as a coach now, you'd hope the players can still come back to what they know best, and then to be able to explore if they need to, and that's, I guess there's no right or wrong there, to be fair, but I was always, me and Kane talked a lot, and he worked things out pretty quick. So I actually think it was quite smart of me to keep asking him questions. But we always talked about ways of playing on a certain pitch, if it was skiddy, or if it was holdy, or if it was turning. And you mucked around with your hands a little bit in your grip, and you mucked around with your options. And I always explored sweeping and what was going to give me the best outcomes with sweeping. But the ability to try and come back to what your actual game plan is when you're playing the game was extremely important. And that, as I said before, knowing when to bring some of the stuff that you have explored out is important. Like, I don't think learning something on Monday and trying to bring it out on Saturday is the way to do it. It's, explore Monday, Tuesday, great, but by Friday or Thursday, you're actually honing in on your match prep and how you're going to approach that particular game or that particular bowler, whatever it is, and then you're trying to evolve your game at other periods of time, and trying to pick the moments to utilize some of your learnings is important. And but I definitely encourage exploration. Like, cricket's artificial, artificial wickets these days. Just the ball comes dead straight to you, and most guys can definitely whack it. Don't get me wrong. What are you going to do if it's coming at you 140k an hour and nipping back into you, or nipping away, or swinging heaps? And so challenging yourself in those nets and in those situations, trying to then test out your technique or test out your game plan, is, I think, where you probably get the most learning.
Right. You touched on making some changes to your game once you sort of entered that the professional aspect of your career. How did you go about making the changes? You talked about your front foot planting, maybe slightly across towards off stump. So, what was the process you went through in order to make the changes you were after?
Oh, it's a long time ago now. I used to have a pre-movement, and I still think pre-movement's a very natural thing. So if you have one, I wouldn't. But my pre-movement would be, it would take my head across. So my head would go and then my foot would follow and sort of end up crossed over quite a lot. And for some reason, I mean, I worked on that for ages, trying to go pre-movement, balance. And I guess the one thing I figured out, and this is my feel, and everyone has to do it a little bit differently, and they got to get their feelings of what gets them moving or what loads them up. I sort of wedged my left hip in, which got my head going towards the stumps down the other end. And that would slightly adjust if a bowler was wide on the crease or left arm bowler and etc. But basically I'd sort of wedged one way to be able to get my head to lead me, and then my foot would follow a lot better most of the time if I did that. But it probably took me 18 months to actually get those types of feelings and figure out that it actually was helping me. So yeah, it's certainly doesn't just happen sometimes.
And so that particular change, did you find that change lasted with you throughout your career, or conversely, were there times when in certain conditions you needed a different approach?
That one there, that was probably the key one that stuck with me for the most part. I definitely went exploring it sometime. You watch guys get better and you watch 2020 evolve and you explore certain things and try different things throughout. But that was probably the one thing that, yeah, I think allowed me to move my feet the way I wanted them to move. Nice, short, sharp. I didn't overstride too much. And I was able to move forward and back. And that's probably one thing I'm noticing with some of the younger players coming through is the transferring forward and back. Like how do batters do that, and how can you play off the back foot as well as soon as they bowl your half volley, you're able to transfer forward.
So what was your relationship with failure, and how did you handle it? Did it affect you, and how you prepared for your next innings?
Yeah, I think it certainly plays a part. Obviously, I think a couple of failures, I got better at letting that go, and I think the way, and I can talk Black Caps here a little bit, but there was certainly a little transition period over a period of time where you felt a little bit more secure because you had the length of games that you could play was a little bit longer, and I know it's been talked about in the media, but that helps you, I think, get through games and still understand that you're not playing that game in fear the whole time. There's certainly times where you fail, and I think every batter naturally starts to feel that pressure of not performing and wanting to perform. So it depend on how long the stretch was, and I probably wasn't the best at handling it. Might go searching a little bit too much sometimes for the magic formula to fix it, and not come back to what I know has worked well in the past. Probably got worse at it as I grew older, to be honest. I think expectations on yourself, maybe expectations from other people and media, etc., start to weigh in a little bit more when you're at the back end of your career, or you've got a bit older and you've done a few things. Always, when I started out and when I was young, I watched Baz and Vittori, and I mean Vittori scoring heaps of runs when I first started, and you go, wow, they just don't look nervous at all. They don't look like they care at all. But they're just so good at doing this and this and that, and you're like, oh, I can't wait till I'm 27, 28 like that, and I don't get the nerves anymore. I reckon I got to 29, 30 and had done a few good things and whatnot, but the nerves are definitely still there. In fact, they were probably a little bit worse as I kept getting older. Don't tell the youngins this one. But yeah, it was interesting there. And I guess the best in the world maybe are able to handle expectations and stay as present as possible and just keep going through simple processes. And I probably wasn't that good at that, to be fair. Often the mind would take you to those expectations of yourself, and they just don't need to be there sometimes. You don't need to be thinking too far ahead.
And just on that, you sort of alluded to almost the blueprint and trying to find that blueprint. And by that, I mean understanding how your perfect week might look in terms of preparation for a game. You know, you've got your technique in order based on the challenge that lies ahead in the match. Physically, you're at a point, maybe you're touching on having a few niggles here and there. Physically, you're at a point where you're maybe not quite 100%, but you're in a space that you're able to compete in. And mentally, you know where you need to get to in order to be primed to compete on the day. Tactically, you know how they're trying to get you out. You've got a good, at least plan A, if not plan B as well, for how you're going to handle conditions. For you, what did all those things encompass for you when you were at your best?
Oh, yeah. It would be the 2-day out training would be exploring what the conditions are and trying a few rogue options and trying to sweep or trying to figure out what is going to work on what we think this pitch is going to be like it or what we expect it to be like at a certain point. And so going through those options, going through those explorations, that was key for me. And then honing right in on game day would be, not game day, on match day -1 training, and just almost going through the way you might approach it in a game without a sweep shot, because I don't like sweeping on a bouncy wicket or whatever it is. That would be my approach. But to be honest, some of my better innings came after 2 dreadful trainings, where you might play and miss a whole bunch, not making good decisions in the nets, and actually walking out to the middle not as confident as you'd like. Many occasions I've gone, oh, what is going on here? This do not feel ready at all. So I think trusting what you have, and you might not get a perfect week of prep. You might not sleep. You might have kids that don't help that. You might be a little bit sick leading into the game. And that's, I think that's what one of my strengths was to go, excuse the language, but fuck it. Like, I'm ready to go. Like, I've done this that week there. Look, this last 5 days wasn't perfect, but what am I going to do right now? And am I up for the fight? And if you're up for the fight more often than not, then you give yourself the best chance. If you've defeated yourself at training the day before, which sometimes it might feel like, then you're probably going to take that into the game. Whereas I was able to be defeated at training and go, oh, well, it is what it is, and carry on into the game. So it's tricky. Like, you obviously want to walk into games feeling confident and ready to go, but I don't think it always is going to happen like that. It's how you deal with it in the moment and how present you can stay and let that go almost. And coaching the bowlers at the moment, it's tricky. Bowlers, especially 2020, they can bowl 3 really good overs and finish with a bad over where 22 runs comes off it, and it just spoils the whole thing. And yet 85% of that game, they've probably achieved exactly what they want. And they have to just keep saying, okay, well, I've just been hit for 6. But the next thing that's important is, can I get a dot ball here for this ball? And so how do you let that failure go from 30 seconds ago and bring that in there? And I haven't bowled balls in my life, really, to be honest, and been under that type of pressure. But I sort of look at it as a batter as well. You play a miss, or you might play some scratchy shots, or you're getting bounced. But how do you let all of that go and come back to what's in front of you right now? It's cliche coaching, in it, but there's a lot of relevance to it. That ability to come back to the now.
So yeah, that's great insight. Really interesting stuff. I'm interested in one point you touched on there, is you mentioned being up for the fight, and anyone I spoke to who would say, played alongside you or played the odd game with you, talked about, you seem to use the word fight a lot. So for you, yeah, what was it about being up for the fight? Like, what did that mean? Was that an aspect of you wanted to make sure that when the bowler's running in, your focus is honed completely in on just simply reacting?
Yeah, pretty much. The hunger, and that's probably why I retired, because a little bit of that hunger, right? Like, you watch Kane. Kane's a great example of it. I'm sure he won't mind me saying this, but he's getting older. But yet you watch him in a Test match innings, whether it's against Bangladesh, South Africa, or Australia, and the hunger to keep repeating ball after ball after ball after ball, to not get carried away with any ego. Or so he came back and played for ND, and he got a nice 63. Probably wasn't one of his better looking innings, but the surface, it wasn't a surface for a good looking innings. It was a surface for what Kane does: play the ball late, wait for it to really get pitched up before he drives. Anything short and wide, he might cash in on. And for him to come back to domestic cricket, go through that process, it was like, yeah, that's the hunger. It's not to show off. It's not to show, hey boys, look at my shot over extra cover, and look at my mean pull shot. I can drop kick this for 6. I want to take on the spinner. Like, it's like, okay, what's required right now? And that is not a strong option for me. And like, to watch that process again is like, yeah, I was done with doing that. But I think that's what makes the best is, ego's gone. This is what I do. This is the situation. It was impressive to watch, actually. It's like going back to club cricket sometimes, and there's almost way more pressure on you in club cricket than there is playing for ND sometimes, because there's this banter, and there's you actually get abused a fair bit. But your ability to come back to what you do in a game of cricket, and not trying to be something you aren't, I think it's quite important. And Kane's obviously innings there was similar to that.
So for you, when it comes to a mental routine, if we're talking about trying to assist aspiring players will talk about how they'll get random thoughts pop into their head as the bowler's running in, and a sports psych might say, there's an element of the ego coming in there at times with certain thoughts that come in. Was that ever a challenge for you? And did you develop a mental routine that meant that you were able to sort of park any thoughts that did come in, so that you were able to just simply focus on the ball that's coming at you and allowing yourself to react to that?
Yeah. Been talking to the lads a little bit about what their routines are, and it was pretty simple. I'd like to, play the ball. Whatever happened. I would spend the next 2, 3, 4 seconds reflecting on what happened. Like, did that ball swing, or did it turn, or should it bounced? Do I need to think about anything more than that? And just go, okay, that was a random bounce. Let's see what happens again, and go through that little reflective process, and then basically whack the ground with my bat, some piece of grass there, but try and go, feel the moment of you actually hitting the bat in the grass. So it's not just And then I would literally try and switch off and just walk back to the crease, go through my technical routine of, hinge, boom, is my bat lift where I want it to be. Right, the ball's coming, watch the ball, and react from there. So that it was pretty simple. It wasn't too hardcore. I'm trying to get guys to, so you can, especially if there's a big crowd, or the bowler's maybe abusing you, or you're playing and missing heaps. Like, go through the process of understanding what's happened. Like, what are they trying to do? Because they'll have a plan. They might be swinging it away for 5 balls here. You also know in the back of your mind that there's potentially an in-swinger that he's setting up for. So for you to still be reflecting on it, I think is important. But then to come back and go, right, watch the next outswinger, swing away and leave that one as well. But you're not getting caught up, too far ahead. It's tough to explain that, I think. But you're always trying to get a read on the game. And you're always trying to be a little bit ahead of what the bowler's doing within reason.
Yeah, that's a great point. I think the whole idea of, certainly as a teenager, I feel like it's easy to get caught up in maybe how you're thinking and feeling on the day. What you're alluding to there is also being well aware of, strategies to target you and what it is they're trying to achieve. So was that something you were aware of, say, playing the later stages of your age group cricket, that so far as you can recall, or is that something that became more prominent in your thinking in terms of strategies for how players were trying to get you out once you entered the professional realm?
Definitely deeper. I think age group cricket. There wasn't so much planning, right, on individual players, whereas as you grow up in the grades and TV, video, you start to become aware of your own weaknesses, and you obviously know that other teams are going to start exploiting certain tactics. Not so much in age group stuff, from my memory anyway. I think there's always the tactics talks, the classic stuff, like if you bowl a bouncer at the tail ender, then we would talk about, definitely go for the sand crusher. Those little things I definitely remember from age group stuff, but it's certainly developed a little bit more, up in levels.
And did you utilize much video analysis yourself, both, say, you viewing your own video and trying to understand where your game was at, maybe any tweaks that were required, or did you ever utilize the analysts that were available to you probably later in your career?
Little bits and pieces. I didn't enjoy watching myself bat too much. I don't know. Sometimes it felt like it. Yeah, I might want to go change something because it looks terrible, right? I would try watch the good stuff, and that's just for self-confidence. Watch a good cover drive. I enjoyed watching some good ducks. Like if I was getting underneath the ball or swaying well, then I felt like my positioning or my decision making was on point, and that's where I could be. So often a bowler, if I got a bounce in my first 10 balls or 8 balls, and I got under it well and I saw it well and I picked up the length, that would help me build my confidence to go, okay, right, I've got an understanding of the pitch. I can't, well, I wouldn't look to pull too early anyway, but I'm not going to pull this, but what's it going to do for my cut shot? Can I play that today or not? Or can I drive on the surface? So that was something that I would watch, because it gave me an understanding of where I think my head was and my balance was. But I used to watch bowlers and try and figure out what my setup needed to be to a certain type of bowler. So, for example, Kemar Roach was the West Indian quick. He was extremely wide on the crease, and from memory, I think he's still quite wide on the crease and could swing the juke balls in quite drastically and swing them away from really wide on the crease. And I would just set up to him like I would maybe, let's say, Tim Southey, who's somewhere around mid crease, but uses the crease as a variation. He was always wide in these big in swingers or these big out swingers, and really wasn't picking up any lengths at all, or any, and struggled for a couple of innings trying to face that. So from that point on, it was okay. Well, just need to take some notes on what are these guys doing that's different to what I might be able to train. And so if we were playing, say, Roach, then I might try to get the thrower or the coach or the flinger to be extremely wide on the crease, and then I'd muck around with where I'd stand. So would I stand on middle? Would I stand outside off? Or, what am I trying to line up, basically? And so that would be a little, I guess, tactical adjustment to bowlers. So that would be my scouting, basically, is what do they do and what do I need to do to just make it feel natural.
Just with Roach, for example, what was how did your guard change or your stance? Did your alignment with your feet change a little bit at all with that wide on the crease angle?
Yep, big time for that particular instance. I went from, I wasn't huge in terms of off stump, so I'd stay on off, middle and off, but I moved to off, but my front foot, I literally brought it right across, so it was probably on fourth. So I tried to pretend basically that the stumps, so you have the stumps straight down the middle, which is a normal kind of setup where your head goes. You might have some subtle adjustments there, but tried to move the stumps basically, I don't know, probably mid crease. So I'd pretend that my head was now between the stumps and where he was delivering from. And so that way it made me feel like everything was exactly the same as it would be if it was a mid crease bowler or a bowler from tight on the. So I was probably quite crossed over, but I was hoping that I'd be outside the line as well in terms of LBW.
Well, that conversation was full of interesting insights into how New Zealand's most consistent wicketkeeper batsman made tweaks to his technique and was always looking to improve his tactical approach to handling bowlers who offered something a little different. I challenge you to take one aspect of this discussion and apply it to your game. If you'd like any advice, you can get in touch with me via our social media channels at Ellie's Batting Mentality on Instagram, Facebook or YouTube. And for those of you dinosaurs still roaming around X, my handle is Mark_Ellison. Until next time, what one action are you taking today to give yourself the best chance of success in your next innings?